In this webinar, we will have 5 speakers, 2 speakers, guest speakers. I mean, is from BRIS. 2 speakers. That is Miss Chu, and second one is Miss Hyperseal. But for this meeting or for this webinar, maybe Mr. Hill will be the first, and then followed by Dr. Xu. And then next, we have our colleague from Philippines, Mr. Jhun Barit will continue. And then we have Dr. Janice from National Nanyang Technical University of Singapore. And finally, the last speaker will be Dr. Vetrita from BRIN. For guest speaker,
recording in progress.
You have only 15 minutes, sorry, because you have what? So you have 30 minutes. Sorry about this. And then for the other speakers, like Mr. Jumbari, Dr. Janice, and Dr. Yenni, you have 20 minutes. So I think we can start. I will be the moderator for you. And then first, we will start from guest speakers. We have 2 guest speakers. Number 1 is maybe will speak first is Mr. Hilario Padilla. I will read his CP now. He's leading regenerative agriculture expert. Is now the project manager and special regenerative agriculture officer at BRIS, a private foundation that support action to reduce greenhouse gas emission in Asia and beyond. He has 35 years of experience in advising and managing projects across South Asia and China on different regenerative farming practices, and has published 2 books and 12 papers on the topic. He formerly worked with Plant Breeding Department of International Rice Research Institute. He also managed his own organic farm. Okay, Mr. Hill, you have 15 minutes. Time is yours. Thank you.
Let me share the screen.
Yeah. Okay.
Could I share screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Wait a moment, please.
Yeah. Oh. Let me just put this one on the side. Okay. Selamat siang semuanya. So this afternoon, we're gonna share with you some burn-free farming solutions that appears to work on the ground. But first, let me tell you about, let me tell you about our partner field, because they are really very important in this project. So field was founded by guys who formerly worked with the FAO inter-country program in Southeast Asia on pest management, integrated pest management. So they have very long experience of running farmers field schools, and they have their own network all across Indonesia. They have also partnered with the Indonesian Ministry of Agriculture, and then also with the National Development Planning Agency. So we selected field because of their capacity to upscale the project. Now, let's just try to look back and try to put our feet on the shoes of small farmers in Indonesia and imagine the situation they're in. Just a while ago, we were talking unpredictable weather, droughts and floods, which are more severe or extreme in a tropical condition. And then they have to deal with degraded or gradually degrading farmlands. So even with high amounts of inorganic chemical fertilizers, they still get low yield. And after harvest, you have to clear the crop residue for a quick turnaround to plant the next crop. And now, without any, of the tools that are, usually used in big scale farming. And now it's illegal to burn. So what should these small farmers do? Which brings us to the experience of this guy, Legimin. He is from Riau. And in June 2019, he was arrested by fully armed police for burning his rice straw. And the police asked him and the villagers to put off the fire. And when the villagers saw this fully armed police, they were shocked. So, and then they learned that, Legimin was arrested. I don't really know if the arrest should be like positive or negative. It has, positive side to send the message that burning is not allowed. And then this guy attended our training after being released. And what does this tell us? It tells us that there's really a gap between the situation of the farmers, technical gap, and burn-free techniques that they could, apply. And that's where our program comes in. So now this guy, Legimin, is now trialing some burn-free farming on his rice fields, which I'll tell you later. Yeah. And let's understand why farmers in Indonesia burn. First, they need to get rid of the crop residue. Second, also the logs and wood when they clear a newly open area. And there's a pervasive perception that they need to the soil to amend especially the peat soils, which is not unfounded. Now, so they burn the crop residue. But coming from a background wherein we do regenerative farming, we always say that the problem is the solution. So if plant biomass is the problem, then plant biomass should be the solution. So we are trying to promote mulch no-till system in raised beds. And you could see that when you put back the crop biomass, like in nature, it builds soil fertility. And since we combine it with no tillage, so you reduce the labor. And since you don't do any tillage, then cropping becomes much easier. And you could do this techniques without the requirement of like really huge machineries. Hand tools and things would do. So this is how they do it. They make permanent raised bed, they stop tilling, and then after harvest, they return the crop residue. And I'm gonna walk you into the techniques. Okay, and sometimes it's surprising that farmers like, this is Legimin, the one who was burning, that attended our training, and they have somewhat different parameters. Like this one, what he appreciated about the technique is that he doesn't have to tread on the mud deep. Like Professor Bambam was talking a while ago of this flooding in Kalimantan and Sumatra, and you could see how deep is the mud. And sometimes this kind of things, that's what they appreciate more than the other benefits of the techniques. So as I said, I will walk you through the process. This is Enkus from Samis, West Java. He works with field as an agricultural manager. So this is his own field, because our motto is that we try everything that we teach to the farmers. So you could see the development of his crops. And when he harvested, he got like 34% higher yield than his neighbor, who actually used like 300 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare. And before harvesting his rice, 5 days before, he sowed mung bean. And as you could see on the upper right photo, 2 weeks later, you could see the mung bean growing. And at mid-crop stage, you will see that the soil is covered. And then to the right of his wife, he got 60 kilograms of mung bean from 700 square meters. And you could see that his field is just the one green amongst of all these 55 hectares field. And you could see that after 2 weeks without rain, all the neighboring fields are cracking while his is not. And his mung bean is doing good for the main reason that the soil is covered. And you could see he has less weeds, because the thing is that when you immediately cover the soil, then you don't give a chance to the weeds to have a head start, and this will really prevent the weeds from growing. And you could see at 2 o'clock in the afternoon at mid-crop.
Oh.
Yeah, what's going on with Hill?
Yeah, I think there's a problem with this connection.
Okay.
Do wait a little bit.
It's interesting actually.
Yeah.
Well, I think problem connection with Hill. Maybe we move to next speakers, and then at the end, maybe if Hill return back, then we will give him loans. If you agree, you, Sue?
Yes, yes,
it's okay.
yes.
Okay, so now is yours. So I will let me read your CV. Dr. Xu Yip is the executive director of the BRIS. She holds a PhD in psychology, and then she has been working in non-profit climate and conservation space for over 20 years, with a particular focus on mitigating the climate impact from agriculture practices and waste management. In her role as executive director, she oversees the development of climate projects and facilitates the collaboration between various local partners and world-leading behavioral scientists to combine behavioral insight with experience and approaches from local stakeholders. Okay, Sue, time is yours, 15 minutes.
Okay, if I may set up my PowerPoint first. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, let me set it up a little bit. Just hold on. Give me a second. Sorry. All right. Hang on. Sorry for the hiccup. And so I would need to show this one and share this one. And then this one, share this one. Okay, all right. Okay, hope you see my screen now. Loud and big and clear. Okay.
Sorry, I lost my connection. So.
Okay, you come back then. You come back now.
Okay, I'll come back. Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Sorry for that. I lost my connection. Okay. Let me continue. Could you see my screen now?
Yes.
Yes, you can continue with your last slide here.
Okay, I'll continue with my last slide. I find that slide, Professor Bambam. Sorry for this, Okay, so and this practice is now practiced in other parts of Indonesia, as you could see. And I just want to get your attention to this lower right photo, because this is in the training center in Jambi. And what we do is that for every training, we create the learning units first, so that during the training, farmers could see for themselves how it builds soil fertility. Okay, and in other parts too, they had been, experimenting on other plant materials, and it's really amazing that once informed, farmers are actually quite innovative, and then they use different mulches. And I want to get your attention to this lower left photo, because they are using, all the slugs and branches as mulch, and using these techniques for like 15 years, 20 years now, I have seen that the hard to decay mulch are actually better because they keep the soil covered for a longer period of time. Now, I will go to the second technique that we promote. It's raised beds with logs. So what we do with the logs and twigs is that we bury them into the soil, and we construct a ditch, and then the coarse material first, follow the finer materials like branches and twigs, then we put leaves, and then we cover with soil. And then the benefit is that you could actually plant right away. It's easy to build the beds. And then once set up, it actually retains a lot of water, which is the main limiting factor in crop production. So, and through time, you could see that it really increases the soil fertility at a very fast rate because you put a lot of biomass. So as you could see, this is a raised bed on the left and the conventional one on the right. And you could see that they are growing better, although obviously they lack a bit of nitrogen for both. And this is a recent picture just taken. As I said, Hero and his team were just there, and they had conducted the training, and then they created a kind of like raised bed with logs on the left, and also like the conventional one. So you see, this is in the training center in South Kalimantan. As you could see, the building there is the same building, so it's in the same site. And the same thing with other crops like peanut. And so they do monocropping peanut, whereas the raised bed with logs, they mix a lot of different crops. And you could see the green color, which indicates better soil fertility. And now, this one has also been tried in Riau, South Kalimantan, Aceh, West Java, and Lampung. And the third one is that we use the chickens to compost the plant biomass. And this is really a very interesting kind of technique also, because you save labor and you let the chickens do the composting for you. I said in the introduction, and I know how hard it is to make compost. And you could just imagine if you are required to make compost and apply it at 20 tons per hectare, that's a lot of work. So what we do is that we use the chickens to make the composting for us. So, and when you increase the soil organic matter in the soil, of course, the efficiency of nitrogen fertilizer use increases. So you get higher yield or maybe the same yield without yield penalty at lesser cost. And this system, because the ammonia is absorbed by the soil, by the deep litter, there's almost no smell. And then you have also healthier chickens because they could eat the grubs, they could dust bath and express all their natural behavior. So it's really a kind of like animal-friendly type of raising chickens. And normally, this one, the chicken house becomes the sort of waste recycling system, because you could even put all the kitchen waste and all the leftovers. And for 20 chickens, in our computation, is enough for 1 hectare, because what we do is that we only put the compost into the planting hole. To increase the soil organic matter, we depend on the mulch because it's easier. So you concentrate the nutrients and give your crops a boost at the initial stage. And the other reason why they burn is that they need to correct the soil acidity with the ash. But for us, we don't advise burning. So we promote these foliar fertilizers, which, you know, we make from eggshells, seashells, bones, and dolomite, because these substances, these materials provide calcium, phosphorus, and magnesium. Eggshells, seashells, they contain 93% calcium, bones, 35% phosphorus, and around 40% calcium. Dolomite, 22% calcium and around 13% magnesium. So they are really very rich. And when you extract it with a weak acid like vinegar, you transform them into a form easily absorbable by the plants. So this is what we do. We mix it with vinegar and then dilute it with water, and then we spray 3 to 4 times in a cropping season on a periodic basis. So you feed the nutrients that are wanting, which are deficient in an acid soil, through the leaves. So that's what one technique we are promoting. So and we have found this one to work because it reduces labor, it's easy, it reduces cost while increasing yield, and the crop after rice normally increases income. Thank you very much. Sorry for the delay. And for some other question, you could get in touch with us through the email below. And thank you for listening to me. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Hill. Your excellent presentations can open our mind that the what you have done maybe could follow, or can do by other person, not from on Indonesia, but also from regional. Okay, sorry, Shu, now is yours.
Okay, let me set up my screen first.
Okay.
Doesn't seem to be, okay, just hold on. All right, well, actually, there's a problem here now. All right, okay, maybe I do this one. I can do it this way, that way. Just give me a second. And let me share my screen. Hang on, stop sharing. Sorry, some hiccups. Share screen. All right. I won't be able to use the animations, too bad. And but anyway, let's start. And so this is hang on. Just hold on. Okay, thank you everyone, and good afternoon everyone. And I'm going to share with you how we use a science-backed approach to promote our burn-free techniques in Indonesia. So what is a science-backed approach? Well, basically, and how is it different from approaches adopted by most NGOs? I would say most NGOs use a commonsensical approach. They focus on raising awareness and providing information and incentives to get people to do the right thing. This approach assumes that people are logical, that once people have the information and incentives, they will act accordingly. But then the question is, are human behaviors really that logical? A lot of research has shown that there is a gap between information and incentives on the one hand and action on the other. People simply do not do what they know already is good for them or for society. For example, if you look at smoking, a lot of smokers could be able to tell you the harm of smoking, but do they have the incentive to quit smoking? Sure, they do, because it's their health after all. Yet, many smokers around the world are still smoking. A lot of behaviors are like this, whether you are talking about a healthy diet or energy saving or regular exercise. So relying on information and incentives is like making a stool with 2 legs only. To make the stool sturdier, you will need a 3rd leg, which is where behavioral insights come into the picture. The insights are based on how the human brain actually works. The insights form a body of knowledge under behavioral science. And after 60 years of research, we now know that the brain relies heavily on to make its decisions. There are some 218 of them identified so far. These rules guide most of our behaviors. They are what makes humans psychological rather than logical. For example, we are a herding species. We follow what people around us do and do what they approve of. What does this mean in the context of burning behaviors? It means that the more fires there are, the more people tend to burn. Another rule of thumb is the availability bias. This means that if we can remember something easily, we also believe it to be happening more frequently than things that we cannot remember. In our context, this means that people believe that the risk of being caught for burning is low So what is behavioral science? Behavioral science is a discipline that draws on findings from psychology, neuroscience, economics, and anthropology. Why do we call it a science? Because it uses scientific methods, namely experiments, and it observes behavior, what people actually do, their actions rather than their words. And the insights are based on findings from these experiments, not just theories. They are what guide our behaviors. The good news is we can actually make use of them more influence over how people behave. These insights also inform us how we should be using the information and incentives, and what information and incentive to use, when to use them, and with whom. For example, studies have shown that if you want to be effective in stopping an undesirable behavior, you should avoid telling people that other people are doing the undesirable behavior. In our case, showing farmers a picture or a statistic that shows others are still burning is going to encourage more burning, which is the opposite of what we are trying to achieve. So you may not want to show a picture like this one here. If the goal is to enhance compliance with the ban on burning, you might want to increase the perception of getting caught rather than just publicizing the penalty for burning. You may want to put up a poster like this one with a farmer on it who was arrested with his name and the sentence he received for burning, so that the risk becomes real in people's minds. That's the availability bias at work. But if you do this, make sure that you also provide an alternative behavior that people can do to stop the burning. So behavioral science, as I've said, is based on 60 years of research. In recent years, it has been gaining more and more recognition, with 2 behavioral scientists being awarded the Nobel Prize in economics in 2002 and 2017. And they're being used by companies, big companies, and governments and international agencies, as well as NGOs. And the project that we are doing with Field Indonesia is called Clean Air Indonesia, and it's a collaboration between a team of behavioral scientists from the UK, headed by Steve Martin, who is also a book author, as well as the faculty director of behavioral science at Columbia Business School. Field, as Hugh has explained, has a lot of experience doing farmer field schools across Indonesia. And what we do is we actually have developed, BRACE has developed a behavioral framework called the Caring Tree with Steve Martin and his team. This framework is being used on all our projects. It consists of a subset of the 200 cognitive biases that are most useful for fostering collective action and mobilizing the masses, especially mobilizing them to take action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It consists of 6 psychological principles. Each principle can be broken down into a collection of related, detailed behavior change insights. The 6 principles are connected, accountable, realistic, identity relevant, network, and gratifying. And we also follow a 4-step process, and which I'm going to go into now. So the first step that we do is to target the appropriate technical intervention. When designing the intervention, make sure that the interventions are gratifying. In this case, we turn the biomass from a nuisance that people want to get rid of into a valuable resource. but it will be rewarding for farmers to practice them. It may look like efforts to promote composting of biomass too. The difference in our approach is that we also apply the realistic principle, which takes into account the situation that farmers are in. Farmers want methods which are easy and require little labor to do. And frankly, who doesn't? Anyone who has done composting, as Hill has explained, would know that it is a lot of back-breaking work, and is probably the reason why many farmers are not doing it. That's also the reason why we are choosing easier alternatives to promote that anyone can do. For example, mulch no-till, which can be done in 4 simple steps. They are also low labor because farmers no longer have to till their land. Or if farmers do want to do composting, they can use chickens as free labor to do it for them. These methods are also low cost because they don't require any machines. And the second step that we take is to look into the motivations and barriers and perceptions around the farmers who are practicing them. We looked at research that has already been done on burning behaviors in other countries. And then we conducted our own research in Indonesia. We surveyed over 1,200 farmers and villagers. And one of the things that we looked at was what factors were important to farmers who burn. We found that burners play more importance on cost, labor, ease, and time than non-burners. All farmers, regardless of whether they burn or not, care a lot about crop quality. We then apply these research data and behavioral insights to design effective behavior change interventions. We decided that we wanted to work on 2 areas. One is to stop the burning, and secondly, to promote the burn-free techniques. To stop the burning, we figured from our research that we can either use a social disapproval campaign or a health-focused campaign. I will come back to this later. To promote the burn-free techniques, we are applying behavioral insights to 3 areas: to our farmer training, to our farmer engagement, and to the publicity campaign to promote these techniques. I won't have time to go into all of them, but I will go into a couple of examples. The first one is how we do the farmer training. When we do the farmer training, we take great care to ensure that the training itself, as well as the training materials, make use of behavioral insights. For example, this is the one of the one-pagers that we have in our training manual. As you can see, we applied gratifying and realistic principles to highlight the benefits and how easy the techniques are. We also know that people generally hate losses more than they like gains. So highlighting what people stand to lose would be more convincing than telling them what they stand to gain. So instead of saying mulching can help them to save fertilizer cost, we say mulching can help them to avoid fertilizer cost. We also make use of the connector principle. So that's why here we put in a picture of an Indonesian farmer practicing mulch no-till as a way of connecting people or the farmers to the technique. This way, farmers will feel that others like them are also using mulch no-till. When it comes to farmer engagement, we also apply behavioral science to it. We engage farmer leaders as our clean air cadres at the community level to promote the techniques in their own communities. We also make use of the network principle because we know that people are more likely to copy the behavior of other farmers, and especially the farmer leaders. We also encourage the farmers only to do a small trial in a small area. We actually don't want people to try the technique in all of their land because we want to be realistic too. By asking people to run a small trial, we reduce their risk perception. After all, people see it as less risky to try a new method in a small area. They will make them more willing to try, and we are confident that once they have tried and see the results, they would continue. A small area also makes the whole thing more manageable and increases the farmer's chances of success. After all, these are new methods and things can go wrong. By getting farmers to do a small trial, we are essentially getting them to continue their existing practice in the rest of the land. This means that this will give us a side-by-side comparison of the new method versus the old method. And this allows us to leverage the gratifying principle. Because with a side-by-side comparison, the comparison would provide us with a greater contrast to highlight the benefits, making the differences easier to see. That's why a side-by-side comparison is better than just a standard demonstration plot. A side-by-side comparison also provides a constant reminder to the farmer of the benefits of the new technique, so that they would be able to see the difference every day. This is leveraging our availability bias, and it is more gratifying to farmers that way. We also use a social disapproval campaign to stop people from burning. And for this campaign, we have devised a poster like this. We have different versions of this poster. In one version, we will use a messenger, which is a local farmer leader. At the district level, we apply the connective principle by using local messengers. We use different messengers. Mothers, religious leaders, farmers, etc., to connect to different audiences. In this example, this farmer leader, his message would be, I want to stop burning because I have farming techniques that are easy and cheap to do. And the message will be for different messengers.
Dr. Xu, you have 2 minutes, please.
Okay, and we also use a network principle by highlighting that a vast majority of people surveyed disapprove of agricultural burning. This can be effective because humans are a herding species. As you can see, we don't talk about why people should stop burning. Instead, we tell people that most people disapprove of it. We use the gratifying and realistic principles here too, but I won't have time to go through them, but I hope you get the idea. And we have the health campaign. Again, we won't have time to go into that. And as a final step, we will be testing and evaluating our interventions. Well, honestly, we won't be able to test everything that we do, but we have chosen to test the social disapproval campaign and the health-focused campaign to see which one is better and more effective in getting people to stop burning. And this we will be testing using a randomized control trial. And here is an overview of everything of how we apply the science-backed approach to our campaign. If you're interested in knowing more about this approach, you're always welcome to email me at this address. And thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Xu, for excellent presentations. I think this is needed by everybody who working especially on cleaning the airs. Thank you again. Thank you very much. We will continue with next speakers. We have Mr. Jhun Barit. Are you here? Okay.
Yeah.
We will read your CP. Jhun Barit is licensed forester, watershed conservation, management, forest protection. He got the bachelor at the University of Philippine, Los Banos. He got also Master of Science in Environmental Science from UPLB. And finally, he get also the Master of Science in Forest Resource from Kookmin University, Seoul, South Korea. And then now he's the Senior Forest Management Specialist. Okay, it's now time for yours, 20 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sarjo. Can you please share my presentation?
Okay.
Thank you. Can you hear me clearly? Okay, so to our guest speakers, my co-presenters, participants, and to our organizers, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jhun Barit. I work for the government of the Philippines as a senior technical staff of the Forest Management Bureau under the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. So today I will be presenting the forest fire prevention, mitigation, response, and management in the Philippine context. So my presentation gives insights on the department's activities, the policies adopted, and the systems developed, and the frontliners or our field personnel's trained. So next slide, please. So this will be the flow of my presentation. First, I will give a brief background about the Philippines, and then I will give some of the problems or issues or challenges encountered in our country, and the fire management interventions as prevention, mitigation, and response that we adopted in the Philippines, and then the way forward, the future development and the next steps on the forest fire management in the Philippines. Next slide, please. So the Philippines has a total land area of 30 million hectares. Can you click the, yeah. So 30 million hectares, of which 14.2 million or 47.3% of which are classified as alienable and disposable lands, meaning it is the land that can be titled, while 15.8 million hectares or 52.7% was identified as forest lands. So forest lands include resources inside it belong to the state, as well as its protection, management, utilization, and conversion. So next slide. So we are fortunate in the Philippines has abundant natural resources with more than 13,000 species of hectares of flora and fauna found in our country. That's why the Philippines is considered as one of the mega diverse countries of the world, and 60% of its species are endemic to the Philippines. But this great number of biodiversity found in our natural forests and these once vegetated forests of the Philippines and their biodiversity are degrading at an alarming rate. In fact, based on the data, in 2015, there are only about 7 million hectares of the remaining forest in our country. So the continuing habitat degradation and forest land conversion are major threats to the Philippine forests and its biodiversity. That's why we have a large patch of land to be protected, conserved, and managed. And fire is very alarming threat in our forest land. Next slide, please. So as you can see, the forest cover of the Philippines are decreasing from 1930s to 2001, and then we have a mass reforestation. That's why it increased somewhat in figures, but deforestation is due to rampant illegal activities such as illegal logging, slash and burn farming, typhoons and landslides, mining and charcoal making within the protected areas. And it has brought many species to the brink of extinction and threatened various conservation efforts. The slash and burn and the charcoal production are some of the activities inside the forest that leads the ignition of fire in some areas if not responded properly. So the effort of the government to combat environmental degradation is highly recognized. That's why we developed the plans and the programs relative to the prevention and preparedness and management in order to suppress the fire. Next slide, please. So, as you can see this photo, it is a sensational and it tells a lot of story. So, as much as we want to save the forest, our property, we also want to save lives. So, as you can see, the people or the child responding in the fire, the people or the community must be properly equipped because he's just wearing a slipper and like that. So, also, we should use the proper tools to put out the fire, and they must undergo a training or capacity building in order to have a knowledge or to be capacitated to put out a fire. So, and also it should have the incident command system, or there should be the one orchestrating the incident and the one who is knowledgeable in the area, the one who knows the fire-prone areas, and the one who understands it. So, and also we should have a pre-attack plan or fire management plan prior to fire occurrence. So, next slide, please. So this photo is the actual response and suppression of forest fire in an incident in the northern part of the Philippines. So the first responders are usually the community around the vicinity. So they are the ones in the photo, the community living in the vicinity of the protected area. Even though they have trained, they are well capacitated, and they have a fire management plan. They have complete logistical requirements. They have fire trucks, they have helicopters, and all the tools that they need. However, there are lack of incident command system to make the fire management complicated. So the community are confused. Who is the commander? Who will lead the group to immediately put out the fire? So the frontliners are confused, and the field offices help them to keep back on track, because when a fire incident happened, time is of the essence, and time is important because fire moves fast. So the time is spent organizing a team, planning, and there are parts of the forest or the property being burned. So it is very important that we prevent the occurrence of fire, or if there's a fire, we mitigate or we suppress them accordingly. So next slide, please. So the current situation in the Philippines. So aside from those issues that recently presented, so the policy issuance or the Philippine forest fire management, the prevention of the suppression of all forms of destructive fires in the country is under the jurisdiction of the Department of Labor and Local Government, or the DILG, pursuant to Republic Act number 6975 of 2010. As you notice, I am at the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, but the fire management in the Philippines is under the Bureau of Fire Protection, which is on the photo. So it is under the DILG. It is the specific agency responsible for the prevention, suppression of all destructive fires, including buildings, houses, structures, and the forest, the land, the transportation vehicles, etc. So next slide. So, but despite the fact that the forest fire is not directly mandated to our department, as I say earlier, we are mandated to protect, to manage, and conserve the forest, including its resources. That's why DNR continue to, our department, or the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, continue to develop, or we are devoted to perform and substantial effort, including the funds to protect the Philippine forest, including rehabilitation of damaged forest areas, aside from the forest fire prevention, which is the DNR focuses, the suppression and fighting of forest fire to prevent further spread and cause more damage. So as one of the initiatives, the DNR through the USAID, we have developed a forest fire prevention, mitigation, response, and management manual. So our field implementers can follow this manual. So next, as a fire management intervention, the prevention. So we should know the community level strategies to protect the fire occurrences. So we conduct a series of cluster workshops. So as you know, the Philippines is a very large, we have 7,107 islands. So we are patches. So the community level strategies are very important to prevent the fire occurrences. So we conduct cluster workshop trainings. Next slide, please. And also, through the conduct of the cluster workshop training, so we determine the causes of fire in their locality at the local level. So is it the smoking, the cooking fire, the children playing matches, waste disposal, charcoal making, or kaingin making, slash and burn farming, or the law enforcement? So we dig deeper to the grassroots to determine the causes of forest fire in their locality, and then we will record it in a database. So next slide, please. And also, we identify the high-risk areas through community mapping or spatial planning. So as one of the outputs of the training workshop, we need the plan to identify where are the priority areas, where are the areas of high risk, identify and teach them how to respond to the fire when the fire occurs. So it's part of the prevention methods or measures we adopted in the Philippines, the community mapping or the spatial mapping. So we generate different parameters in order for us to identify which areas will be the fire-prone areas or hazardous to occurrence of fire, and also through the number of occurrences in their local areas. And then, next slide, please. And then recently, we conducted, as the preparation to the onset of dry season in the Philippines, and though we are in the pandemic, so we initiated to conduct a webinar on the how to prepare a fire prevention plan involving the potential supporters and partners. So we need the involvement of other relevant stakeholders for us to have their inputs and their resources also. So next slide, please. The fire mitigation, the fire management intervention, the mitigation. So in order to mitigate, we should prepare a community pre-attack plan. So for the last 5 years, in 2015 to 2019, the forest fire management is included in the 5-year National Forest Protection Program. So it's one of the menu of options. So the DNR have a National Forest Protection Program, and it's down to the regional level at Strategic Forest Protection Action Plan by each regional offices. So it is incorporated in their strategic forest protection plan. So can you press the next button? So as you can see in their pre-attack plan, so there are areas where you can identify the hotspot areas prone to fire, and then it was overlaid with the forest cover. So we identify where are the areas with vast natural forest, and then where are the areas that the forest fire might occur. And then we prepare a community pre-attack plan so that on the onset of the rainy season, they have the plan that goes to show that they are prepared in order to mitigate the occurrence of fire. Next slide, please. And also one of the system that is being implemented in our country to devise a fire detection and communication system, we are implementing the Lawin Forest and Biodiversity Protection System. It's also a system that was developed with USAID and was turned over to the Philippine government, and we are now using it and adopted it as the national strategy for forest protection. So the mobile application was used by our patrollers or our forest rangers who are conducting patrolling or monitoring our forest, and then they record threats, and one of the threats that are being recorded in the system are fire, slash and burn, and kaingin. So we can identify where are the areas with frequent occurrence of fire through the system, and the system not only records the threats on fire, but also the threats of cutting of trees or the threats of infrastructure penetrating the forest, like that. So we call out some of the data on forest fire, and then we analyze the data, and then through the spatial mapping, and then putting out it in, laying out it in the remote sensing data also. So next slide. As part of the mitigation also, we cascade interagency partners that needs for the dependable landscape level fire management team. So we organize a fire management team in order for us to have a clear roles and functions when the fire occur. So in order to mitigate the fire when it occurs, so we trained some of the personnel and we organize a quick response team when the incident of fire happened. Next, please. So as part of the mitigation also, we will develop a fire detection and communication system. We call it the Forest Fire Danger Rating System. The Forest Fire Danger Rating System is also one of the commitments of the Philippines in the ASEAN Agreement on Transboundary Haze Pollution, so on the AATHP. So it's one of the commitment of the Philippines to develop a functioning and operationalized fire danger rating system. And we are now on board on developing the system in coordination with the Philippine Weather and Climate Agency and the Bureau of Fire Protection. So a series of meetings and consultations have been conducted, and we are now on the phase of hiring a consultancy service to develop a well-operating and functioning system. So hopefully by next year, we can use the fire danger rating system in the Philippines, because it's also a big help. So as a conventional part of the mitigation process, so we prescribe defense provision for the area of anticipation of forest fire occurrence. So when we develop a pre-attack plan or a fire management plan on each field, we surely identify where are the fire-prone areas. So as a mitigation process, so some of the regions identified with a high risk or fire-prone areas, they need to construct a fire break. So these are the photos of some of the photos we gathered from the field while constructing or brushing the fire breaks before it is burned. When it burned, and then they stuck a pile of water along the critical portion of the fire breaks. So construction of fire breaks is one of the mitigation, and we also use this conventional method. Next slide, please. And also as part of the mitigation process, we distribute firefighting tools nationwide for them to have a defense provision in the area where the fire occurrence might occur, where the fire might occur. So aside from the distribution of firefighting tools, as you can see on the rightmost part of the slide, it's a photo training our field personnel on how to properly use the tools that were given to them. So it's part of the mitigation process. Next slide, please. So the fire management intervention as a response, so as the output also of the series of workshops that we had, so fire suppression map and the quick response team must be established. So this map, the fire suppression map, will serve as a tool or a guide, particularly during the pre-attack planning. So it is suggested that the area must be divided into different simple grids of the system, and then identify all the information available per grid. So the values at risk, where are the risk areas, the available crews or the manpower capability on each grid. So how many people can this area deploy when the fire occur? How many resources can they give during the fire occur, like logistics, like helicopter, ambulance, fire trucks, and firefighting tools and all. So because most of the grids have different resources, different availability of manpower, different local government units that run. So it's very important to map it out before the onset of the fire, and identify the established fire breaks, green belts, and among others during the fire suppression map planning. And also the establishment of the quick response team. So all the personnel from the field office are being trained by the Bureau of Forest Fire Protection, and then they also trained in responding to fire. So next slide, please, the last slide. So what are the way forward from the Philippines? What's in it for us? So the way forward is that the institutionalization and nationwide rollout of the forest fire danger rating system. So as I said earlier, we are on board in developing the FDRS, or the forest fire danger rating system. So there should be a fire alarm system established locally in coordination with our weather agency and the Bureau of Fire Protection. So we could adapt and practice some of the successful or the best practices that some of the biggest fires occurs in the Philippines, so that we can integrate the fire warning, weather warnings, and we could develop the right rating for the FDRS. So next is the establishment of the incident command system. Like I said earlier. So even if you are equipped, you have a plan, you have tools, you have all the logistical resources, and you have the manpower. If there is no incident command system, it will collapse. So it will not be effective. So there must be one who are orchestrating or commanding the putting out of fire. So in the establishment of the incident command system, the Department of Environment and Natural Resources field implementers should coordinate with the civil defense in terms of engagement through local incident command systems or basic orientation trainings to become a cadre. So the last part is to strengthen the Department of Environment and Natural Resources field offices partnership with the local bureau of Fire Protection and the local government and the ND or the Regional Disaster Risk Reduction Management Council and other relevant stakeholders in order to have a strong foundation when it comes to forest fire incidents. In addition, this could help the campaign to reduce man-made caused fires in the area of our responsibility. So that's all for my presentation. Last slide. So thank you. Maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat from Philippines.
Okay, thank you very much for your excellent presentation, Mr. Barit. So your presentation, we know how the Philippines fight in the fires and then start to prevent the fires. You mentioned about the role of community and also capacity building, community mapping, and how you mitigate forest fires, and also organized fire management, and finally the way of forward. For instance, like fire management system and ICS, etc. So thank you very much for your presentation. Maybe the audience, if you have many questions, you can ask through the chat. So now we will continue for the next speakers, Dr. Janice Huay. You read your CV. She is a land system scientist and study the socio-ecological drivers, mechanism, and effect of land use and land cover change in the tropics. Lead the couple human and natural system lab, where the combine of geospatial data with the ground social and ecological field survey. Your research, current research interests include the sustainability of the palm oil sector, tropical peatland management and restoration, agricultural impact from natural hazard and biodiversity and livelihood outcomes, and from the operation for agricultural communities. Okay, Dr. Janice, time is yours, 20 minutes.
Thank you, Bang, for this time and this invite for presentation. Let me just share my screen. I'm just gonna share screen and then try to present from here. So can you see my screen?
Yes.
All right, great. Thanks so much. So as mentioned, thanks so much for inviting me for this workshop. So what I'll be talking a little bit more about is actually the topic on revegetation for fire management. So this is a work that is done in collaboration with many researchers, not just myself, but especially plant ecologist researchers who are based at the school that I'm at, which is the Asian School of the Environment, and at Nanyang Technological University of Singapore. So I'm a researcher, so we conduct research projects, and one of the projects that we wanted to work on was actually to conduct it in Jambi in Indonesia. And so we have a whole host of Jambi collaborators, University of Jambi collaborators. We also have collaborators from West Kalimantan and also LIPI. But the core team of the researchers are Estia, UT, and Stuart. So they are the ones who are leading the research work together with the collaborators. And we are funded by the Ministry of Education in Singapore using the Art Tier 2 funds. So I would also like to give credit to my collaborators and also my co-PIs who are listed here. I won't go through all the names. So I think the topics that have been mentioned earlier are very directly related to the issue of fires. So far, what I'll be going through a little bit more is on the issue of peatlands and restoring the habitat in order to manage fires. I think the audience is not I mean, the audience is quite familiar with peatlands, so I'll go through these sites quite quickly. So we know that tropical peatlands are very important wetland ecosystems. They store large amounts of carbon, and we want to preserve them in a wet environment so that we prevent the issue of fire from happening. However, there's a lot of land cover conversion because of lucrative agriculture such as palm oil, pulp and paper, and these are encroaching into tropical peatlands, draining them and resulting in canals that are being dug out, trees that are being removed from the ecosystem, and basically a lowering of the water table such that the peatlands are getting drier and so more susceptible to fires. So you have a whole host of policies and also actors in the landscape that results in this issue of peat deforestation and drainage, which has been very well studied in this part of the world, in Malaysia and also in Indonesia. So how does peat degradation increase fire risk? So in the natural state, the water table would be very high, very close to the surface. But when you construct canals, it start to decline. And so it leaves peat, which is exposed to the air. And so that results in peat oxidation, but also because it is dry, there is a long period of drought. And when fires are ignited, it becomes very difficult for these peat soils to be eliminated of fire, especially under prolonged drought. So the end stage is an ecosystem where you have lost the peat, as in many cases in Northern Hemisphere, in Europe and also in the UK. But you also have systems which convert from basically a terrestrial to maybe a pond or like a wetland system. So this results in large amounts of biomass being burned and also biomass under the ground. So a lot of peat carbon is also released through the ignition and fires. And here you see like smoke plumes that are happening, which can then spread across Southeast Asia. And in some ways, that's how Singapore and Malaysia get involved because of this transboundary issue with fires occurring. And that's how, we as even though not having peatlands, it's also very important to think about how can we protect ecosystems, how can we invest in ecosystems in order to prevent fires and in order to stop the fires from happening in the first place. So after the 2015 fires, which were pretty damaging and also caused international headlines, there was an interest to restore peatlands, and so Indonesia sets up the Peatland Restoration Agency. This mandate was extended to also include mangroves recently, and the idea is to re-wet, revegetate, and also to revitalize livelihoods in the peatland ecosystem. So these 3 R's were meant to really try to ensure that the peatlands are wet so that no longer it would be set on fire so easily, and also to ensure that these systems remain wet and are still being productive for the people who are living in these ecosystems. So our project as researchers, we actually wanted to conduct a lot of fieldwork in Indonesia and to look into the role of community participation in peatland restoration. But all this didn't work out because we were affected by COVID. So we were not able to conduct any fieldwork in Indonesia when the project started. So what we've done is to come up with a few different projects looking at peat restoration across Southeast Asia. So a lot of desktop research started out because we were not able to do fieldwork. And even if we were to do fieldwork, it was very rudimentary fieldwork that was done just prior to COVID-19 happening. So I'll be presenting, not all these projects. So this is a poster that we presented at the International Peat Congress, and it demonstrates the various research projects that we embarked on, both looking at the ecological and also the social issues of restoration of peatlands. But I'll just be focusing on those which are related to the ecological restoration, which highlights the issue of revegetation. I think the second R in the BRG's strategy. If you're interested to download a copy of this poster, you can get it from this bit.ly link. There's also a copy in Bahasa Indonesia, and you can scan this QR code, which has got my voice, which is a little bit boring, but it'll guide you through the different projects using an audio recording. So I'll be talking about these two projects, looking at revegetation and link it a little bit more to the issue of fires, because we want to try to prevent fires at the end of the day. So firstly, we started on the project looking at reviewing peat swamp reforestation, because very little actually is compiled to be able to understand whether or not revegetation actually succeeds or fails. And then secondly, there's a project that we actually adapted to work in Singapore to try to collect plant ecological traits to understand plant flammability and decomposability and relate that to plant species selection for revegetation. All right, so I'll start off with the first project, which was the research aim was to investigate what are the range of species that are used for peat swamp revegetation. What are some of the management interventions that were applied in the revegetation plots? For example, applying fertilizers, weeding, mounding, and also measuring the survivability of the seedlings in these sites. So it's very easy to establish a revegetation plot. It's very difficult to ensure the sustainability of the revegetation plot. A lot of times, many of these projects begin, but the monitoring period only lasts when the grant funding lasts or the project funding lasts. After that, nobody really knows what happens to these sites. And, they could have been burned down again. So a lot of effort goes into collecting the seedlings, preparing them in the nursery, planting them in the site. But what happens to them after that? What actually ensures the survivability such that you completely revegetate as much as possible to a peat swamp forest is very understudied. It's very understudied in the reforestation literature in general, but especially so in the peat swamp tropical revegetation literature. So there are many steps when we are thinking about revegetation of peat swamp forests. You need to select the species, you need to know what your site is, you need to know what kind of management interventions you want to apply. And then, you also want to monitor the situation to be able to understand or to protect the site from fire itself. Because what's the point, right? If you're going to grow and then it's affected by fire, what is your next step then? Are you going to continue, trying to repair the site or trying to regrow more seedlings, or do you just abandon the project? So this is really a process of trial and error. I think that the topic is something that is not new. I mean, it's been going on for decades, but it definitely hasn't been done in a very systematic I guess the data for it hasn't been collected to form a systematic review on it. So what we've done is to do exactly that, so that we can form a knowledge base on what has been done in the past few decades. And the way to go forward is to use a systematic review process, which is following the Cochrane and Collaboration for Environmental Evidence Guidelines. So what this does is to pull together multiple studies, apply a filter to them such that you select studies with criteria that excludes other studies. So if you have certain studies that doesn't include, for example, the sample size of the seedlings, it doesn't include proper labeling of the species, then we'll have to exclude those studies. So this is the framework for method of systematic review. You have a scoping, formulating of your research question, you have a development of your exclusion criteria, and then you screen the literature, and then you will then do a meta-analysis of the literature that's identified. And then you will run it through certain models to look at the results, and then you report the results. So a systematic review embarked on a very comprehensive search on the kinds of revegetation work that has been done in Southeast Asia with regards to tropical peatlands. We didn't just limit our work to academic journals, we also compiled information from grey literature. So many of these guidelines could have been reported in a contractor's report, for example, or maybe in an NGO's report, or in a stakeholder reporting kind of report to the funders, for example. So these different data sets were put together. We didn't just focus on English, which would have excluded many different conference proceedings in Bahasa, in Malay, in Japanese, in German. So these different languages were also looked into and screened. And we basically put together studies that were focused on peat swamp forests, degraded peatlands, planting of native trees. So we didn't include planting of, I guess, fruit trees or like agricultural trees. And we wanted to monitor and studies that monitored the survival and growth so that we can pull out this data, extract this data for meta-analysis. So altogether, there was a pool of 600 articles. But when you conduct the filtering, not all articles would report all data in a comprehensive way. So I think there was a shortlisted group of studies from that 600 articles. And then altogether, there was about 94 study sites that were looked into. And the distribution of these study sites, I'll show in this map here. So you have sites that are in Malaysia, in Thailand, in Brunei, and also most of it coming from Indonesia. So here we see the distribution in country and the number of study sites. And within Indonesia, most of the studies are coming from, of course, Central Kalimantan, which has got a great, field site ongoing there, and also in Riau and Jambi. So these are also provinces in Indonesia which have large extents of peatlands and peatlands that have also been degraded. Some of the questions that we asked, which native peat swamp species survive and grow best, which seedling and site treatments enhance survival and growth, and can plant functional traits predict species survival and growth. So we looked into these different studies and we put together the diversity of species that were being used to replant peat swamp forests. So what we have here on this graph is the x-axis, we have the percentage of survivability. And then on the y-axis, we have all the different types of species that have been used and put together from Southeast Asia. On average, the plant species survivability is at 61%. So it's not too great, but it's not below 50. So it's a good thing that there is some moderate success of species that are able to survive in terms of regeneration for peat swamp forests. However, you can see a very wide range of variation for species survivability. So some species survive really well, above like 68%. Some don't do very well, and within some species, it also performs in different directions depending on the site conditions. One thing to take note, there are many species that are happening in peat swamp forest, but only when we look at the data, it's really 1/10 of the potential species that we're planting. So in some ways, what we're doing in these active replanting of peat swamp forests is that we are using a small pool to try to recreate a very diverse peat swamp forest. And of course, it could be limited to the limitations of seedling supply, right? It could be limited to the difficulty of getting tree species that are, only rely on masting to be able to produce the fruits and the seeds. So that's all considered. But it's important to note that, we might be inadvertently planting, very limited diversity of revegetated plots to try to revegetate such diverse peat swamp forests. So that's something that we found through our literature review. We also found that, in general, slow-growing swamp species can persist longer in these revegetated sites. When we look at the treatment effects, we can't really tell whether or not there is really a strong treatment effect because the way many of the studies are set up are not very good at assigning control and treatment experimental setups. So it's very hard to determine, whether or not fertilizing, setting the seedlings on mounds, weeding has got a strong effect on seedling survival. We also looked at plant functional traits. So for example, leaf nutrients and wood densities, which show a slight relationship with the survivability of the seedlings. But in general, one of the key findings is that slower growing species can survive for longer in these revegetated plots. Some of the lessons that we learned from this project is that many of these studies report the revegetation monitoring setup in very different ways. So it's not a very standardized way of reporting peat swamp forest revegetation. There was lots of missing data, for example, the description of the site, whether or not there was any canal blocking, not collecting data on the water table level. You know, the hydrology of the peat swamp system is very important also to determine whether or not, you know, these seedlings survive or not. So quite a lot of these very important data is also kind of missing in the reporting of these revegetated plots. So this is also something that we pulled out as a learning point when we did this systematic review. So this is focus on a literature review looking at plant species in Southeast Asia's tropical peat swamp forests and the revegetation success. Next project that we did was actually more field-based. So because we could not go to Jambi, we focused our work in Singapore. And the aim was to investigate what plant traits, for example, decomposability and flammability, how these plant traits could be linked to the plant functional traits across swamp tree species, and relate that also to thinking about, you know, selecting future species when we want to revegetate. So this work involved very extreme botany. So you need to really love plants to do this. You collect the leaf litter, you sort the leaf litter, and then you identify to species from the leaf litter. And, you know, we were able to do this through a very amazing team of students and research assistants. And one of the interesting parts of this work is to do this flammability experiment. And I'm just going to show you a video. So what my research assistant, one of the research assistants, Estia, works on is to sort of video also and calculate how much time is taken to allow a leaf to burn, what is the point of ignition, like what you see here, and also how much smoke is, you know, removed from this burning event, so that we can use, you know, this information to characterize the species flammability trait. And it's measured in these components: ignition, combustibility, and also sustainability. Ultimately, is to integrate these flammability properties into selecting species for future revegetation. So you won't want to select a plant species that bursts into flames, you know, very quickly, right? You want to try to select species that will be able to sustain, be able to survive the first fire at least.
Sorry, you have 2 minutes.
Okay, I will wrap it up. Thank you, Pamela. So we try to also couple leaf flammability with decomposability because we want to also understand how peat is formed. And peat is formed when plants decompose slowly. So if you get a plant species that it doesn't burn easily and also decomposes slowly, that would be an ideal plant species to have in your peat swamp ecosystem, right? Because then that plant species can contribute to peat accumulation when the leaves drop into the peat, and then, you know, it decomposes slowly. So decomposability traits are also being collected by using these litter bag experiments. And you might be wondering, does Singapore have peatlands? I mean, we have freshwater ecosystems. Our peatlands are all drained and, made into urban infrastructure. These are actually freshwater swamp forests, which we still have in Singapore. And so we sort of use this as a proxy site because some of the species in these freshwater swamps overlap with the peat swamp forests in Indonesia. So this is our framework. We're still working on the experiments and collecting litter bags, I think, for decomposition. And then next, we'll do a lot of laboratory work, which we'll outsource, and then get people to give us information and pull together, these traits for plants for selection for revegetation in peat swamp forests. So, this is some preliminary results. Already you can see specific species of the plants have got different traits across ignitability, combustibility, and sustainability. And I believe these three blue, like the species in blue, they are also plant species that you can find in peat swamp forests. So I think with that, I'll end. I won't go through this slide. And just to make a main point that, we are targeting, I guess, this part of the 3 Rs, which is to look into revegetation and revitalization of livelihoods. So thank you very much. And pass it on to Pak Bambang.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Janice, for your excellent presentations regarding the peatland. And you mentioned about Dr. Asmadi, is my colleague. She's working on BRG for 5 years and continue with BRGM. We have meeting last week with also Pak Asmadi. We have a good demonstration plot where we establish about the 13 years what's experience to regrow the burn pits. Now we have a good ones. We have discussed last week with the future BRG before, Pak Aris Gunawan and others. I think it's a good idea. And regarding your plant permeability and the composable also very good. I conduct research this for about 20 years ago in Japan. When I conduct my PhD, I'm working on pre-S content. So from there, we list about more than 30 species, I think, so that we know which one is the most flammable to the fire. Again, thank you very much for your presentations. Okay. Now we have the last speakers, Dr. Yenni. Sorry for this delay for 10 minutes. I will read the CP for Dr. Yenni Vetrita. She's a scientist in her early career, a space technology application expert who has worked for the Indonesian Remote Sensing Agency, LAPAN BRIN. Research interests include using remote sensing data to investigate tropical fires. In most recent publication focused on satellite-based area detection in peatland and nutrient fire story and relationship to climate change and human-related and cover change. Dr. Vetrita graduated from IPB, conducting get the forest management into 2000, master science from master science in space and technology application from China's Beijing University, and also got the PhD geospatial from the South Dakota State University in the United States. And he also received the awards, including the third place in Student Foster International Competition at the Victoria Symposium 2000 in Sioux Falls, United States, and Student Travel Award from the American Geophysical Union in 2019. Dr. Yenni, time is yours, 20 minutes.
Professor Bambang Hero, can I share my screen?
Okay, please.
Thank you. I believe you can see my screen for now. Let me make it show. Does my voice loud and clear enough, Pak Bambang?
Yes, excellent.
Okay. Okay. Good afternoon from Jakarta, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Yenni. I work for Aeronautics and Space Research Organization, or LAPAN. We were previously a space agency, but I'm now part of the National Research and Innovation Agency, or BRIN. One of the standards is devoted to remote sensing. Till now, we have concentrated not only on research into how to identify any objects, processes, or phenomenon on the Earth's surface, but also on providing national remote sensing data ranging from low, medium to very high resolution imageries as licensed by the government. But today I will discuss the current application, the difficulties, opportunities, future directions of prospect associated with mapping Indonesia's fire history using remote sensing data or satellite-based approach. This is only a small part of our focus to support early warning and fire management in Indonesia. Besides this talk, we also do monitoring the active fire, also fire danger rating system. Our colleagues from Philippines also mentioned that we did the same way, and also for disaster quick responses. But today I'm going to focus on this topic. I will begin by discussing the topic's significance and then discuss current applications, the difficulties, the prospects, and the future directions. I'm glad that I put in the last speaker because Janice has told many things about peatlands. So I just want to continue that. I now believe Pak Bambang put me there at the end because most of the speakers, the previous speakers talk about the ground stage, but now we are going up into the atmosphere and the sky. So burning, particularly in peatland, has been linked to major health consequences, the human death, and other socioeconomic concerns. And Indonesia also believed to have contributed nearly 40% of average annual global fossil fuel carbon emissions in 1997. Whether or not it's correct, whether or not it's debatable, but that's what we found. That's what the reference found, and about 5% in 2015. The history of fire has an effect of the amount of smoke produced by peat. Knowing the history of a fire enables the manager and stakeholders to plan for the next plan of action, including for fire prevention and rehabilitation. Now, fire history data derived from remote sensing has also been extensively used to construct geospatial-based scientific proof. I believe Pak Bambang also used this a lot for remote sensing base. By studying fire history, we can gain a better understanding of each location's fire regime, which it's different in terms of the severity, the intensity, the frequency, and how the fire begins. Now, changing the vegetation typically entails altering the fire regime itself. Now, let's see the next slides. On these figures, we can see how land cover types have altered depending on the number of the times an area has burned. We can see that the more frequently fires occur, the less probably it is that the area will revert to its primary land cover type, the forest. So you can see this, so many times burned, there's no time enough to get back to the initial state of the land cover type. Now let's have a look at some applications that make use of remote sensing data. The two most widely used data sets for investigating fire history are active fire, or we call it hotspots, and burn area. These two data are not similar in their concepts. A hotspot detected an instantaneous thermal anomaly that was clear enough to gaze down to the Earth when the satellite passed, while the burn area, or more commonly called the fire-affected areas or burn scar, is determined by changing the object's surface reflectance over time. Well, typically by examining the pre and the post-fire, or the post-fire events. However, hotspots are even more extensively used due to the availability of the long-term data, not only for national, but also for the global purposes. So you see in the right, you can observe the association